Our story begins in Salonika. It was the largest port city in the Ottoman Empire on the European side. It housed Turks, Jews, Greeks, Armenians and other Balkan Christians and Muslims. Zabea Hamin and El Reza Elfende, her custom officer husband, lived in the Turkish side of this cosmopolitan. After the death of their three previous children in 1881, Kemal was born. Elfende sent his son to military school. He changed the destiny of his son, but in turn, the Turkish nation as well. Kemal was taught in two schools. The European side had freedom and thoughts that can grow and flourish, while the Middle Eastern side taught jihad and slightly backwards thinking. He had come to value Western values. After the death of his father, and pleas from his mother not to, he enlisted in the officers' school in Salonika in 1893. After 2 years of secondary school, he was admitted to the military training school in 1895. While being away from home, he was made aware of the differences between the European side and the Middle Eastern Asian side. At school, his friends showed him banned works of European philosophers like Karl Marx and Voltaire. He looked at the empire and saw realistic ideas to try and save it. He saw the empire was becoming a police state and foreign powers waiting like vultures for the sick man of Europe to die. The first was Greece, over the island of Crete, in 1897. Tensions over the island actually broke out into war. Seeing the men march off into battle brought militarism and nationalism boiling up inside him. Of course, the Greeks won. Then 2 years later, he went off to Imperial Military School in the exotic capital of Istanbul. Istanbul was divided like all capitals between the poor Turks and the rich foreigners and the minorities of the empire, like the Jews, the Armenians and the great powers. The foreigners with their wealth were the shadow government that controlled Istanbul. The Turks were prisoners in their own country. It was friend against friend. Corruption was rampant. It was man versus man to get a lucrative place in the government. The colleges were no different. Sanitation was terrible. Sultan spies everywhere, and no forward thinking and overcrowding overwhelmed the candidates. Students were forced to pray 5 times a day, first to the Sultan and then to Allah. In 1899, he started his cadet studies in the infantry class. Mustafa and his friends drank in the European region to get a taste of the European lifestyle. While the Sultan cracked down on Western ideas, Mustafa embraced them. He wanted to find solutions militarily to the empire's problems, and he was becoming more political and more ambitious. He viewed himself as the savior of the nation. In 1905, after graduation, he was imprisoned for illegal newspapers. He was then exiled, but while the beginning was full of hardships and struggles, it would bring glorious victories for Atatürk in the end. When he first got to his post, he saw how the army was so corrupt and even worse than the government. The people hated the rule, but he saw Islam dominated the people's lives and enslaved them and gave them no hope. In Damascus, he was a loner and realized he could not just force change, but the Turkish people had to force change throughout. He founded a group called Motherland and Freedom. The motto was, "Where there is no freedom, there is death and extinction. Freedom is the only way." In 1908, the Committee of Union and Progress, another secret society, revolted and overthrew the previous sultan. After the Young Turk Revolution, Kemal warned the Balkan possessions were in imminent danger. He suggested to give up the Balkans as a lost cause and move closer to home in Anatolia. The previous sultan organized a counter-coup to destroy the liberal government, and Mustafa was promoted to Chief of Staff, officer of the army, and then his mission was to suppress the counter-coup by the sultan. After defeating the sultan, defending the revolution, and appointing a sultan puppet, Mehmet V, the group held their first congress. In his first political speech, he criticized the party and suggested to separate church from state. This and further criticisms made him a marked soldier yet again. He then wrote books and translated other army doctrine for state defense, especially in the Balkans. A war was surely brewing. After Salonika, Tripoli, which is Libya, and the Balkans, he had a reputation for a fierce military commander and a great strategist. After the wars with Italy and the Balkan nationalists, the empire lost much of its North African and European territory, with the Arabian Peninsula all being left. With these losses, the Triumvirate was formed, and for the next 6 years, controlled what was left with an iron fist. The promises of destroying dictatorship and tyranny, they became what they set out to destroy. Absolute power absolutely corrupts. He was then posted as a military attaché to Sofia, Bulgaria, where he wore a traditional Ottoman officer's uniform from the 17th century. He was larger than life. While he enjoyed Bulgarian social life, he was still bitter that he was a lieutenant colonel and Enver Pasha used his powers to become first a minister of war and then a general. Mustafa Kemal was one of the many who saw World War I was coming. The Allies were moving closer together. Britain was not being as supportive as previous, and the infiltration of Prussiophiles were all over the Ottoman army. While he suggested neutrality, his legend was born in World War I. Started with the Central Powers, and the Entente started to attack the Ottomans. After the stalemate of the Western Front and the deadlock of the Caucasus, a flank needed to be made at Gallipoli. After the plans were ready, the British and French, with some Russian help, attacked the Dardanelles. Imperial might and overestimation would be their doom. Only 3 days earlier, Kemal was sent to the Dardanelles and commanded the 19th Division. Napoleon Ants, who will control Istanbul. Mustafa Kemal will control Istanbul. The greatest naval engagement of the war began. The Allies attacked the Dardanelles. After being beaten off by failing to destroy the forts and artillery, they retreated, and Churchill became impatient, wanting a full-scale invasion of the Dardanelles. After the sinking of HMS Ocean, Irresistible, and Bovet, the British wanted a full-scale invasion to destroy the cannons and artillery, and to capture Istanbul by foot. The greatest naval operation until D-Day was about to happen, but so was the disaster of Gallipoli. On the 25th of April 1915, under heavy naval bombardment, the Allies landed at Alabulu, now known as Anzac Cove. The Anzacs landed and marched inwards to Chunuk Bair. It was at this moment Atatürk was born. He ordered his men, with no ammunition, to hold the line. Mustafa was in the thick of battle, and his soldiers saw this and were willing to die on his orders. Then he uttered his most famous and infamous words. "Men, I am not ordering you to attack. I am ordering you to die. In the time it takes for us to die, other forces and commanders can come and take our place." The tactic worked, and the Anzacs were tricked and dug in, making the Western Front all over again. At the end of the day, the Anzac advance was halted. He became a colonel in June and took command of the whole front in August, the Lion of the Dardanelles. He then led a successful attack in the Suvla Bay area. While leading a counter-attack against the Anzacs, a piece of shrapnel lodged into his heart, but a pocket watch saved him, and he had minor injuries. This changed Kemal. He now knew he was immortal as he walked through heavy fire and made troops confident and made him a legend in the trenches of Gallipoli. The Turks held all the strategic hills, and the mighty British and French were defeated. He went to Gallipoli a outcast. He returned as a national hero. It was, however, the last great Ottoman victory, and the sick man of Europe was dead. Defeat after defeat the Ottomans and the Central Power allies faced. The Empire era was over. The Sykes-Picot Agreement, along with the Greeks and Italians, were ready to splice up the spoils of war. He was promoted to a general and fought in the Caucasus, and then he fought with Allenby and his forces in Palestine and Iraq. But October was the death of the Ottoman Empire. The new Sultan surrendered and was the second Central Power to fall, and all three pashas ran off to the Caucasus, Azerbaijan and Georgia. The Allies after Germany began to occupy Turkey. Like Germany, but 20 years later, he had the proud title of undefeated Turkish commander of World War I, but he would gain a more immortal title, Atatürk. World War I was over, and the war to end all wars was over, but the Turkish War of Independence and border skirmishes in Europe would change that. Foreign flags flew everywhere, the Allies controlled the government, and crime was rampant. The only hope for Turkey was the Defenders of the Rights Association, which opposed the occupation of all regions that are Turkish, especially in Anatolia, and Anatolia was the birthplace of Turkey. It had the majority of Turks, and the best bet was to station their forces from Anatolia, the only unoccupied territory in all of Turkey. He was friends with the Sultan, but did not trust the Sultan. The Sultan, however, gave him command of what was left of the 2nd Army Corps and 5 provinces. This was enough for the British and the Sultan to regret it. While Kemal gathered his forces, the Greeks landed at Izmir. When the Greeks landed, so did Kemal at the Black Sea. The war for Anatolia had begun. After World War I, however, and the loss of World War I, the Turkish people were worn out. Kemal had to shake and awaken the Turkish spirit one last time to free the Turks. He wanted them to seize their own destiny and make a struggle by the people, for the people. Everything had to be legitimate and well-founded. The Azamir Declaration was signed. A man of great dedication and great commitment was needed. Atatürk was right for the job. He was viewed as a rebel general, and the Sultan asked him to return to Istanbul at once, while even the people and even his own government had their doubts about Atatürk. Too ambitious, too personal. What was the end goal? He was now a civilian and an ex-general, with no army. Yet Kazim, who had orders to arrest Kemal, did not, but instead handed over his army to Kemal. In rebellion, he opened his own government in Ankara. While he was building an army and planting the seeds of independence, the Greeks were moving towards Ankara. Mustafa Kemal drew strength from hopelessness and fear. His determination, will to fight for freedom, and fearlessness made him able to work tirelessly and with great vigor. He appealed before his Ankara government. Freedom and independence are my character. I put as my main condition that my country should have the same characteristics. In order for me to live, I shall be the child of a new nation. Lafayette Yuskari, who would be the jewel of Atatürk's eye, and would come to help him in his struggle. Although not married, they were the perfect couple. On the other side of Turkey, however, the allies of World War I with Italy made the Turks sign the Treaty of Sevres in 1920. The war for independence had come. It was time to rally the people and the struggle for independence. He and his parliament acted with swiftness and finesse, and the allies were always caught off guard. Kazim was ordered to capture the Turkish towns from the Armenians in the peace treaty territory. The eastern borders were secure. Next were the Greeks. They were not going to go without a fight, however. The Greeks and Lord George underestimated the Turks yet again. They thought the nationalists were no serious threat, but they were wrong. The Greeks were marching towards Ankara, but Atatürk was not alarmed. He realized that the Greeks were too far from their headquarters and would be easily encircled. He had to act quick and without question, however, as he asked his parliament to grant him great power. Supreme Commander Atatürk. He was about to organize and prepare for the Greeks. The Turks rallied behind Mustafa and independence. The Turkish nation was decided at the Battle of Riva Takara. He was always in the thick of action. After 30 days and 30 nights of fighting, the Greeks had been stopped. After this battle, he would become a household name, not only in Turkey, but in the east, close to the British colonies as well, like Palestine, Iraq, and Persia. In just 2 years, he opened a parliament, operated a new government, broke the unity of the allies, regained Turkish lands, and repelled the war-weary but still strong allies. The rebel would be the savior he had always dreamed of. With one last attack in the west, the east was at his doorstep, as the communists had an embassy in Ankara, which actually proved that he was a legitimate government of Turkey. On the morning of the 26th of August, the Day of Judgment would begin. Turkey hanged in the balance, but victory was immediate as the swift attacks caught the Greeks off guard. In just 3 days, the Greeks were defeated and all generals surrendered. As the Turks went to retake Erzurum in the west, they unified the Turkish Republic. The Greek vision of a renewed Byzantine Empire was gone. Turkey was secure. Some people wanted Atatürk to be Sultan, but Atatürk actually wanted to abolish the Sultan with his new government. It was freedom for the people, freedom for all. He made clear that the allies and his parliament made clear as well, this was a new government which should be treated with respect. And in 1923, Mustafa Kemal, with the help of his Ankara government, gained independence for all Turks. And that is the story, the man, the myth, the legend. The US called him a dictator or a quasi-dictator. Stalin called him a fascist. Hitler called him a communist or socialist. But to the Turkish people, He'll be always remembered as Atatürk, father of the Turks. Anyway guys, thanks for watching. Before we go, semi-documentary stuff. I only did up to the Turkish War of Independence, so yeah, CEO, that's where you get the Turkish War of Independence and your great-great-father of Turkey, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, sorry about that. But anyway, if you want to know, he actually won a Nobel Peace Prize, patched up things with Greece, and was awarded from all the Central Powers and even Afghanistan. So that's pretty interesting. He was a man bigger than life, wearing 17th century uniforms in 1914 or in 1912 because he was in Bulgaria. He was a man that modernized Turkey, made the perfect Turkish woman when he married Sakura, I believe, I can't remember, but wanted the Turkish women to try and model in the image of Sakura. So that's pretty interesting as well. And Venizelos actually mended ties. He was the Greek Prime Minister at the time, or was the former Greek Prime Minister, and mended ties with Atatürk. And of course he was the key signature in the Treaty of Louisiana, basically making the country of Turkey. But I hope you guys enjoyed, hope you guys learned something, and I'll see you tomorrow, I guess, because Atatürk's basically gonna outshine whatever I put out anyway, so that's basically it. Anyway guys, hope you learned something, and I'll put a documentary in the description that actually tells you about how Atatürk's myth is kind of coming on the fire, so that should be interesting. It's in Turkish, so I'm sorry about that. If you could get it dubbed or could give it to me in words, that would be GG, but I doubt. But anyway, hope you enjoyed and hope you learned something. Peace.
China's young nation, Father Atatürk believes in her democratic future and has preserved for her under his autocratic rule the Republican Constitution and the secret ballot which will elect his successors. His severest Western critic grudgingly admits Atatürk is dictator so that Turkey may never again have a dictator.